and fund my car. From a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying, all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
And before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's BABBEL.com.
Debbie Hart is president of
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise, in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
When your tenants have an overflowing block sink and you've got a busy day ahead, superheroes crashing through the wall isn't going to help anyone. With Direct Line Landlord Emergency added to your policy, we're on it to send a rather super drainage engineer in 4 hours before you've tucked into your lunch. We can also assemble plumbers, locksmiths, glaziers and electricians. Search Direct Line Landlord Emergency. We're on it. Direct Line. Residential properties. Optional add-on up to $1,500 per call-out. Extreme weather conditions may extend response time. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
With the shift to remote working, video conferencing has become the new normal to keep your business running. But is it reliable and secure? Cisco WebEx is committed to the highest security standards and already trusted by both small businesses and many of the world's largest organizations. Call, message and meet securely with Cisco WebEx. Sign up at cisco.uk/work-from-home. When secure remote work is critical, WebEx is essential.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rocked that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake or snack on us. Go on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details visit costa.co.uk/terms.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again and surprise that special someone.
Happy birthday!
From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
When family video calls are too good to miss. Your virtual quiz team is demanding a rematch. And one more episode just isn't enough. You need loads of data. Get a massive 30 gig for £10 a month from Smarty Mobile. With no speed restrictions, unlimited calls and texts, and a flexible 1-month plan, it's no wonder you Switch awarded Smarty Best Values SIM-Only Network 2020. Search Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. See smarty.co.uk.
What would the world be like if we listened more? At Honda, our ears are always open to new ideas. Oh, there's one now, knocking on our eardrum. What's that? What if we made a car with cameras instead of wing mirrors? A robot mower that knows when it's time to cut the grass. A self-balancing motorcycle. And what if by 2022, all of our mainstream cars were hybrid or electric? Great idea. Thanks, ears. Honda, the power of dreams.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Roger Hearing with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. And European stocks snapped a two-day losing streak. Investors seeming to keep faith with economic support measures. Reassuring earnings news also, not least from SAP, Europe's largest technology company. Their shares rose 6% after reporting better than expected second quarter revenue. Has to be said now that it's looking a little more mixed on the screen. Europe stocks 600 up 0.2%. The FTSE down 0.2%. French futures also, French the CAC Courant absolutely flat right now. The DAX is still up 0.8%. The IBEX down 0.1%. The FTSE MIB down almost 0.2%. It's also quite red, and you look to the US futures. S&P 500 the futures down 0.25%. Dow down 0.3%. The Nasdaq flat there. When it comes to the bond market, we're looking at US 10-year benchmark Treasury 64 handle. That's down 1 basis point. Very little movement, actually, in terms of bunds and gilts this morning. In terms of the dollar also flat, had been weakening a bit earlier. And in terms of cable, the pound 0.2% stronger this morning at 1.2631. And WTI $40.64 the barrel. Brent $43.06 the barrel. That's the Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garrison with more on what's going on around the world. Leanne.
Roger, thank you. Global coronavirus cases have topped at 12 million, with the US now accounting for more than a quarter of confirmed infections worldwide. Both California and Texas are reporting a surge in cases. Cleveland Fed President Loretta Mester says the renewed spread is adding to the pressure facing the economy. She says these numbers are troubling. In Israel, critics say Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is undermining democracy. This week, Parliament approved an emergency law that curtailed its own powers. It allows the cabinet to take any decision deemed necessary to curb the spread of coronavirus. Netanyahu says these emergency measures are needed. And Thailand's, the world's top producer of coconut milk, says it will enable retailers and consumers to trace coconuts back to their source. This will show where the monkeys have been used for harvesting. The $400 million industry, which relies on monkeys at some plantations, is facing possible boycotts in the US, Europe and Australia. That comes as the animal rights group PETA alleged that monkeys are being abused and treated like coconut picking machines. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. I had no idea that monkeys were used to pick coconuts. Did you know this, Roger?
Well, I vaguely was aware of it, I think. I mean, animals generally are used far more than you might expect. I mean, I think it's Asian fishermen, some of them use birds with their beaks all tied up. They go and get the fish from the water and then come back and they get the fish taken off them. So a little bit cruel, I think, really.
Leanne?
I only vaguely knew about it too, but when Roger just said that, I had a mind blank because I was trying to think of all the things that animals do when it comes to harvesting food. And there's so much, isn't there, like ox wagons?
Yes.
They've been used for years and years, but this has really caused shockwaves around the world. So a lot of people have been very disturbed over this PETA report that did come out, and it does seem that Thailand is bowing to pressure now, and you will be able to know where your coconuts are sourced, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think it's a good thing, but I also think, have you ever tried to climb a coconut tree? It's pretty hard, but apparently they're now making some dwarf plantation trees, so they're easier to pick.
Right.
Oh my
Never
goodness.
sit under a coconut tree. That's my one piece of advice in general.
Yeah, I
don't try to climb one either.
No, I remember reading it's actually a surprisingly high percentage of people that get killed by coconuts falling on their head. Not to end on a glum note there. I drink a lot of coconut water. I hope the monkeys haven't been picking the coconuts. Anyway, Leanne Gerrans, thank you so much with the world news. Let's get back to the markets and economic prospects now. Joining us down the line is Callum Pickering, senior economist at Berenberg. Callum, great to have you on the show with us. Thanks so much for joining, as always. Look, I'm going to start on, well, not necessarily necessarily a surprising note, but it's not something that we necessarily discuss every day. But of course, we're going to hear from Joe Biden, who's going to present his economic plan in Pennsylvania later today. And the reason I want to bring it up is that Goldman has been warning that investors need to hedge for a delay in results from the US elections, because with the virus and more mail-in voting, that could add to the risk for murky results. And then you've got JP Morgan saying that Wall Street is too negative about a Biden win. Meanwhile, RBC Capital Markets recently did a survey in which they said institutional investors put the number one thing that's keeping them up at night, it's not COVID, it's actually the US election. I thought that was quite striking. Do you think investors are going to be kept up at night more by the US election into the back half of the year than by COVID?
What a question. It depends, of course, on virus trends. If, as in Europe, we continue to stay on top of the virus, yes, the focus will be on the big political issues of the day, Brexit and the US election. But if we suffer major second waves that require nationwide lockdowns, I think if very quickly the world started to look like March again, we would care much more about the virus than politics. I take a partial note in comfort that the market is now focusing on political trends rather than the virus. It reflects, if you could say this, a return to something resembling normality. That said, looking at US virus trends, that seems to be the immediate risk that we should all be watching closely.
Yeah, and Callum, obviously out there also is this growing tension between China, and the US, but also the rest of the world more generally. It just seems to get hotter and hotter each day, really. The latest things being from Australia with regard to Hong Kong, but also these comments by Mike Pompeo. I mean, that must surely be another thing that perhaps deprives our investors of sleep.
Yeah, the global economic outlook has seldom been more uncertain than it is now. And I would actually note that for the global economy, at least, and especially us here in Europe, a Biden presidency wouldn't be such a bad thing. I think there's a clear distinction we can draw between the consequences of a Trump presidency over a Biden presidency. If we have Mr. Trump again, that is probably marginally positive for U.S. domestic. You'd get tax cuts, you'd get further deregulation, pro-growth reform, but he would be highly unpredictable when it came to global matters, foreign and trade policy. Mr. Biden would be quite the opposite. You'd expect a little more regulation, a little more tax and spend, perhaps a bit negative for U.S. economic outlook. But for the global economy, Biden would be much more predictable. He'd look to make an ally of Europe. And on the China issue, even if he may go actually a little harder, especially on some of the human rights stuff, than Mr. Trump would. He would go through the existing channels, such as the World Trade Organization. So there would be an element of predictability about Biden that would be a positive for the global economic and market outlook.
Interesting. Just before we get to the UK, Callum, I just want to quickly ask you about Loretta Mester's comments in terms of sort of having yield targets linked to reaching targets for economic outcomes. She said, when you get close to those targets, that's going to pressure yields higher. Do you agree that it's problematic to have a policy of capping yields linked to targets for economic outcomes?
I think in certain circumstances there is actually a good argument for yield curve control. One of the problems that you have with monetary policy is as soon as it starts to work, markets start to price in the better growth and inflation outlook at the long end of the curve, and that represents a partial tightening of financial conditions. And when you're at the zero lower bound, as we are across the advanced world, if you can keep long-term interest rates low while you raise inflation and interest rate expectations, what you actually do is you create an easier monetary environment. The gap between the equilibrium rate and the market rate starts to grow, and then that starts to reinforce the economic recovery. So there is a lot of logic in yield curve control. It's just what happens is once you get there, it's very different to step out of that environment, as we've seen with Japan.
Callum, let me bring you on to the UK. We heard from Rishi Sunak, of course, yesterday. A certain element of underwhelmedness, I think, was the feeling out there. Interestingly, this morning, the pound stronger by 0.2% on cable. We're also seeing actually very little movement in terms of gilts. I mean, did you feel that what he was saying had the capacity to really tackle the UK problem?
Well, the UK is a flexible economy. As long as we don't get a major virus wave, second wave that requires a national lockdown, the economy will recover. There should be no doubt about that. The same applies to other advanced economies. So there's a question of proportionality here. Of course, we've become so accustomed to the shock and awe policies with Mr. Sunak since March that it would be pretty hard to beat those expectations again. Keep in mind, what we have in the UK is 30 billion of new money, which is targeted at increasing employment and stimulating the weak part of the economy, which has suffered as a result of the virus. It comes on top of the 130 billion, according to the OBR, that has been spent and will be spent since March, and it comes ahead of the autumn budget, which will be in November and December. So by and large, I thought I was fairly happy with that, and I emphasise the extra spending on job centres and administration to increase employment. It doesn't make sense for the UK to hoard employment in parts of the market which will be structurally lower because of the pandemic. Better that those people get retrained in new productive areas of the economy, and the budget went some way to achieving that.
That's interesting, because actually earlier this week, Callum, I was saying, what's the point of increasing jobs in job centres? But you've told me why. Callum Pickering, senior economist at Berenberg. Great to have you with us. Thank you so much. And Roger, we've got lots more coming up. We are almost an hour into the equity market open here. SAP has been absolutely rocking it. Best performer on the Stock 600. Overall, the benchmark up 0.3%. This is Bloomberg.
The Boston for the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise, in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
When your tenants have a burst pipe and you've got a busy day ahead, superheroes crashing through the wall isn't going to help anyone. With Direct Line Landlord Emergency added to your policy, we're on it to send a rather super plumber in 4 hours before you've tucked into your lunch. We can also assemble locksmiths, glaziers, electricians and drainage engineers. Search Direct Line Landlord Emergency. We're on it. Direct Line. Residential properties. Optional add-on up to 1,500 per caller. Extreme weather conditions may extend response time. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel. Eurotunnel Le Shuttle. A safer way to France and beyond.
Hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
The idea is to really hold the economy in suspended animation until we get control of this virus.
We are very much in a picture of monetary dominance.
We will get slower growth. I mean, let's not get confused about that.
We are in a national crisis. I think it is for all parties to pull together.
The euro area is facing an economic contraction of a magnitude and speed that are unprecedented in peacetime.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
A very good morning from London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Matt Miller from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio.
So we've had some great conversations about this morning about what people are thinking about Rishi Sunak and the summer statement. Mainly, it's that the UK Chancellor didn't do enough. So we had the Resolution Foundation on, the NISA boss, the British Chambers of Commerce has been speaking to us too, all really saying the same thing, that they wish that the Chancellor had done more. But then we're also going to get a great take in a few minutes' time, because speaking to Bloomberg Television is Annalise Dodds, who is the Shadow Chancellor. So she's on the Labour Party side, and they had a pretty good line actually out of Labour, that we were expecting a new deal and instead we got a meal deal. So that's done the rounds. It's a nice little tagline.
I just want to say, I know because I listen to your show every morning. So
Good.
The one thing I would say is it seems as though, and correct me if you think this is wrong, but it seems as though Rishi Sunak has definitely left the door open for more. I mean, saying basically we're going to revisit this in the fall, which I guess you call autumn, and he's going to, then come back with more. Isn't that the idea?
Yeah, absolutely. He's left the door wide open to that. And I think that there is simply an idea that, the furlough scheme has still some weeks and months to run. And perhaps the hope is that the economy will bounce back more quickly than expected. And that's certainly what has been a little bit the tone in Europe, hasn't it? That actually post the lockdown, perhaps the economy is rebounding more quickly than expected. We've heard that from some ECB officials. So perhaps the hope is that that will also happen here in the UK. Obviously, it's all dependent on a second wave.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the second wave is, I asked one fund manager today if this person had a position in place, a hedge in place in case of a second wave, and there was a nervous chuckle in response. So, I think everyone is a little bit worried about that. On the other hand, markets seem to be doing fairly well. At least here in Germany, we're adding 152 points to the DAX this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Up by 1.2% right now. The broader stock 600 also gaining, Matt, almost 0.4%. At the top of the pile is SAP, up by 7.3% this morning. Europe's largest technology company, reporting better than expected second quarter results. Also, though, of note, of course, this morning was the Shanghai Comp, an eighth day of gains, adding to that rally that we've seen over the past week of 9%. I mean, all aided, of course, by official support. The Chinese stock market continuing to surge, and a lot of it is individual investors, just huge sums of money is going into ETFs. As for the futures, though, looking to the US market open, S&P 500 E-mini futures have been in the red all morning, down 0.1%, even though we did see that market hit a 1-month high on Wednesday. And also the line from Goldman Sachs telling investors to prepare for volatility around the US presidential election, to extend hedges out to December expiration. So there's a worry that actually even the usual amount of attention on the US presidential election will be even more volatile this time round. Just lastly, in the bond markets, update you there. We stand at 65 basis points for US benchmark yields, so down 1.5 basis points. German yields at negative 45 basis points. So that's a quick look at the markets.
All right, so let me update you as well on the virus situation. Cases globally have topped 12 million, and the U.S. is now accounting for more than a quarter of the confirmed coronavirus infections worldwide. Both California and Texas are reporting a surge in cases. Joining us now is Bloomberg Health editor John Lauerman. So, John, can you now see the impact of specific events in the U.S., like the Trump rallies or the Black Lives Matter protests? Are you starting to see infections spread from those, incidents where people have gathered closely together?
Well, I think we have a story today that from Tulsa, which is where President Trump held his most recent rally. The top health official in that area, is saying that there is a local surge in cases, and which was 18 days ago, I believe. And he's saying that it's probably connected to that rally. Now, it may be connected to those protests around the rally as well. But I think the point is that you can see that the state that there's just not as much attention really to controlling the virus. People aren't wearing masks. In states where people aren't wearing masks and where they're congregating or have been allowed to congregate, the virus continues to increase in numbers.
John, is it safe to increase? Is it safe to say that fewer people at the Trump rally, Trump supporters, were wearing masks than, say, protesters, Black Lives Matter protesters were wearing?
Gosh, I don't know anything about that. I wasn't there. But the point is that you have, all these people continuing to congregate and not wear masks. And that's why there's still no mask mandate for the U.S. And as you pointed out just a minute ago, 24%, what, a quarter of the world's cases and a quarter of the world's deaths, and still not taking the measures that would be necessary to control it.
Well, what I did read on the Bloomberg terminal that I thought was interesting this week was that as the number of cases in, what Americans call red states has gone up, then the kind of approval ratings of President Trump have gone down, and the disapproval around how the US government has handled the pandemic have gone up. So, it is, we know, a very politicized environment, even though it is a health story. Do you think that anything is changing? Do you think that it raises concern about future events? I mean, sporting events, political conventions. I just mentioned that the big banks are now looking at the US presidential election race in November as being, even more of an inflection point.
Yeah, I think that's a really important consideration. We have these political conventions coming in the fall. The Jacksonville, where the Republican National Convention is planned for, is become a real virus hotspot. And local health officials there are also concerned about the future. And of course, sporting events in the fall. I mean, Major League Baseball had opened up some training camps. Now some of those training camps are suspending activities. Ivy League schools are saying now that they are going to cancel Division I sports for the fall, and I think you may see that more universities may see the same sort of equation, the same math working out, and begin taking the same types of actions.
All right, John, excellent to get your take on this. I'd say Caroline, I can't understand why people wouldn't wear masks, especially in areas where increased infections are a problem. I read a story on the Bloomberg overnight about a London art dealer who was busted for millions of dollars in fraud, and he was on some distant Pacific island when they caught him, and they brought him back, and now they're transferring him from jail to jail in the U.S. And part of the story that shocked me, he's in an Oklahoma holding cell right now with 18 other inmates, and they're apparently not required to wear masks. They're given masks twice a week, but none of them, according to the story, actually bother, and they're not required to do so.
Yeah, look, it's a big area of debate. I do think the things in the UK, certainly, that has been kind of more unhappy with the use of masks, when you look at the sort of the questioning of the public in the polls and so on, actually does seem to be changing here, perhaps.
But what would you be unhappy about? The mask prevents the droplets of aerosol from leaving your mouth or nose, so then you won't infect people, or you're less likely to infect people if you're wearing a mask.
I don't know, maybe it's habit, if that it's something unusual to get used to, something different, but I'm not exactly sure. But look, perhaps Laura Cooper has the answer for us, our Markets Live macro strategist who joins us this morning, because certainly investors seem to be less focused on the coronavirus and the ins and outs of that than they are on the reopening of the economy, the fiscal monetary support. What do you make of what is going on in the markets right now? Or do you think that actually in the background there is the nervous laugh about hedging that Matt mentioned at the top of the show?
Well, I mean, I think that is the case. I mean, certainly we are seeing this dichotomy facing investors. We have global stocks are holding out fairly well despite rising infections. And I think this just shows that markets are really pinned on kind of this threefold prong of monetary stimulus, fiscal stimulus, and the fact that, we have seen up to this point economic activity begin to recover from these depths. Now we're starting to kind of see that last leg, that the economic recovery starts to stumble, certainly in the U.S. when we look at activity gauges. And then, rising infections, yes, they're not really perturbed by, investors aren't perturbed by it at this stage, but that's really because they're focusing more on mortality rates. Now, mortality rates the U.S. are kind of remaining contained. But then there is a lag to this. So the spike that we saw earlier in July is likely to kind of show through those numbers next week. So we could actually see these bouts of virus fears begin to kind of bring back some of that volatility that we have seen previously. So still at this stage, I think markets, yes, are kind of nervous under the surface.
That's a great point. And Sarah Ponchek and Vildana Hadrick wrote a fantastic story a couple of days ago on explanations for the stock investors, looking past the rising COVID counts. And you're right to point out that people like Tom Lee are looking more at Fundstrat, are looking more at mortality rates and more at, the age, for example, of people who are infected, how serious those infections are, rather than just the number. Do you think we're going to see that change, or is it going to just take a snapback in deaths in order to hit markets harder?
I mean, I think ultimately what it comes down to is how it impacts consumer confidence. So if we do see a tick higher in mortality rates, but yet, we're still seeing indications that business confidence, consumer confidence is holding up because they don't actually anticipate kind of fresh lockdowns or kind of the current reopenings to be delayed even further, then that's likely, to kind of have investors pinning back kind of these stimulus hopes again. I think, crucially, it comes down to fiscal stimulus at this stage. There's really little that monetary policy necessarily can kind of shock and awe for investors at this point. It's actually a case of just getting those direct injections to the real economy, and that comes back to the benefits, because we have extended benefits set to expire at the end of this month, and a number of unemployed workers in the millions rely on those benefits. So if we pull that out, they could see kind of significant shortfalls in incomes that will ripple through the economic recovery.
Yeah, very worrying. Thank you so much for joining us, Laura Cooper, who is our Markets Live macro strategist. But Matt, I'm going to give you a more honest answer to that question you asked me about why not wear a mask. I think there's been much more scepticism, certainly in the UK, about whether the masks work in real life, whether the benefits are more than marginal. And I must admit, it was difficult for me to wear my own mask. So I will go with the flow of actually what I think is a UK perspective.
So that's very interesting indeed. In any case, it's a debate that, I'm not qualified enough to delve further into it. But for me, it's like if there's a possibility that it could save lives, I'd rather wear a mask than not. Also, I think, personally, masks look pretty cool if you get the right one. I wear this cowboy bandana, so I kind of look like I'm going to hold up the gas station when I go in. In any case, we're going to come back with some Bloomberg opinion.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Today, nearly all business is international business. The same goes for business disputes. That's why the International Center for Dispute Resolution provides a faster, more efficient approach to dispute resolution across borders. Backed by the American Arbitration Association, the ICDR is the world's leading provider of dispute resolution services. Find out why global expertise matters. Visit ICDR.org.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs.
The CEOs of Amazon, Facebook, Alphabet, and Apple will all be going over to Washington via Zoom, I suppose. On July 27th, they're going to be in front of the U.S. congressional panel investigating competition into the technology industry. The four big tech executives are likely to face a torrent of critical questions from lawmakers on the panel's antitrust subcommittee as the investigation builds a case for revamping antitrust enforcement. To discuss, we are joined by Congressman Ken Buck of Colorado. Congressman, thank you for joining us here. Curious about what you really want to hear from these executives come July 27.
Well, we've been investigating now in the subcommittee for several months, and what I personally want to hear about are how these large tech companies are using their platforms and if they are discriminating against the customers of those large platforms and competing unfairly with those customers. I think there are a number of buckets of issues that are being investigated right now. Some of the companies have purchased what would be competitors in the marketplace and have stifled competition to their platforms.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Anne-Marie Horder with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. European equity markets having a brighter day today. The DAX is up more than 1.3% this morning. Stock 600, the benchmark, snapping a two-day losing streak. We are up nearly 0.5%. SAP is really the standout, up nearly 8% this morning. Europe's largest tech company reported better than expected revenue. In Asia, Chinese equities outperformed yet again. The CSI 300 and the Shanghai Composite both closed up more than 1%. Both these indices closing out 8 days again. Really remarkable rally. Animal spirit-like appetite we're seeing from retail investors there. U.S. futures are relatively flat this morning, but of course we'll be looking out for the weekly U.S. jobless claims report. That comes out 8:30 Eastern Time, 1:30 here in the United Kingdom. And across the FX markets this morning, we have the euro strengthening against the U.S. dollar, 1.13, as well as cable, 1.26 this morning. And commodities, WTI and Brent are both lower this morning. WTI trading just under $41 a barrel. Lots of new fresh concerns over swelling U.S. stockpiles. And gold, another shining day. We are trading north of $1,800 an ounce. Some market watchers think maybe it could hit all-time highs. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Roger Hearing for more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Thanks. Now, in Israel, critics say the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is undermining democracy. This week, Parliament approved an emergency law that curtailed its own powers. It allows the cabinet to take any decision deemed necessary to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Netanyahu says these emergency measures are needed to fight the virus. In the US, the likely Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden will call for a moderate approach when it comes to reviving the US economy. Sources have told Bloomberg his plans would shelve some of the more ambitious proposals being pushed by progressive Democrats. He plans to deliver the details in an economic speech today. And the number of school leavers here in the UK who want to start degree courses has hit a record high despite the virus pandemic. Figures from UCAS suggest 40.5% of 18-year-olds have applied to begin university this autumn. It's the first time more than 2 out of 5 have submitted their application by this point in the process. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Hearing. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It has just gone 9:20 in the city of London. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist Marcus Ashworth, who's writing about BBVA's attempt to use a bond as capital and a green financing tool at the same time. This is the Spanish Banco Bilbao. What is it? Banco Bilbao Vizcaya Argentina? What is it, Marcus?
Yeah, Argentaria.
Yeah, that was my guess. Is Marcus there?
Yeah, that's why we call it BBVA.
It's fun to say I love to say Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation, you know? But anyway, back to this bond, Marcus. Do you think it's going to be successful? I mean, can you raise money and also finance good things at the same time?
Well, it's interesting because we got the final book stats out this morning, and where it was billed, sort of going into the start of the overall deal, it was going to be about 3 times over, which sounds great, but as in 3 times more demand than the amount for sale. But as it happened, it only came out at 1.8 billion worth of orders for the 1 billion deal, which is actually very low for this type of deal, which are normally extremely well in demand, and everyone falls over them. There's a nice big coupon of 6% is pretty rare. But this is a risky bond, and it shows you that perhaps, you know, this isn't quite the easiest time sometimes for all banks anyway to sell this type of debt. So maybe the green thing confused people. Certainly it's not eligible for any green bond index. I'm almost certain there were no green bond official funds in the deal because they're just not allowed to buy these sort of things. It's not in their index, etc. So demand was less than other deals. It wasn't a great one, but I think the green thing is a bit of an irrelevance because you simply can't really, I think, call this a green bond because it's supposed to be providing support for the entire bank, not just for the teensy-weensy bit of the green assets they have.
So I guess why did they bother would be one question, and then is this a trend or like a weird, quirky one-off?
Well, the regulators must have approved this. This is the SRB, it's part of the European Central Bank Resolution Board, and equally the Bank of Spain. So the risk is, yes, this does become a thing. It's certainly the first. They were very keen to signal it's the first. They were the first ever bank to issue an AT1. So they have form here on doing new things. They've already got 5 regular senior bonds which are green, which is exactly what they should be, that type of bond. But I think this is virtue signaling possibly of the worst order. And ironically, the people who may have bought it can count it as well, the funds that bought it, and say, well, we're investing in green bonds because we bought this bond, and look, it's technically called a green bond, therefore it counts against our goodwill of doing the right thing. So it's a bit of a dangerous territory, I think, whereby both the issuer and potentially investors, though as it seems not that many of them, might want to go for this type of thing when it really shouldn't be in the green bucket at all. It should be something different. It's just bank capital. Bank capital should stay bank capital. Green bonds should be green bonds. They should follow the ICMA rules and regulations, and this is a stretch too far, in my humble opinion.
Right. Well, but, marketing. Marcus, are we going to see a spike in issuance ahead of concerns of a second wave? I mean, are companies in Europe going to try and shore up their finances just in case?
Well, look, we're coming into the dead zone. We've had a lot of issuance. We're going to get an awful lot more government issuance, which is going to crowd out corporates. We're talking about cocoa bonds. Bank Inter, a much smaller bank than BBVA, came yesterday. That's the first sort of what I call spicy deal, which has come of late. So clearly, the window's opening for briefly, albeit for the more sort of high-yieldy type names. That's probably a good thing. That's exactly what all these ECB measures are trying to create, and enable people to raise capital where they can. But I just think for the moment, we've got a week or two maybe for these types of deals to possibly get away, and then it's going to shut down for the summer, depending on if this recovery fund gets through. If they don't get this recovery fund through, we're going to have a long, hot, torrid summer.
Marcus, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, Marcus Ashworth, Bloomberg opinion columnist. Of course, we get that first in-person meeting of the EU leaders next week about that €750 billion recovery fund. You can catch more OPIN of Marcus's work and all the rest. OPIN Go. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. Atlanta Dream co-owner Kelly Loeffler has sent a letter to WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert objecting to the league's initiatives to honor the Black Lives Matter movement. Loeffler, who is also Also, a Republican U.S. Senator asked the league commissioner to scrap plans for players to wear warm-up jerseys with Black Lives Matter and say her name, and instead put an American flag on all uniforms and apparel. Loeffler says we need less, not more politics in sports in a time when polarizing politics is as divisive as ever. Engelbert issued a statement in response to Loeffler saying the WNBA is based on the principle of equal and fair treatment of all people, and we, along with the teams and players, will continue to use our platforms to vigorously advocate for social justice. The WNBA Players Union put out a tweet saying, "Enough," out in response. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
How long? How much? How many? Financial, policy, and medical experts are working on answers 24/7.
What about public debt?
We are listening to those experts 24/7.
Is the Fed effectively widening this wealth gap with its programs?
Because you want answers too.
What's the most important, the trillions in stimulus, the economy's reopening, or the infections curve bending?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Who's in your corner? At Commonwealth Financial Network, our advisors would say we are. Our supportive environment lets you be true to yourself, and our culture of accountability means we don't just ask for your feedback. We act on it, so we can deliver the solutions you need to enrich the lives of your clients and build the business you've always dreamed of. Ready to discover the difference? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor.
What's the true value?
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Thursday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again and surprise that special someone. Happy birthday! From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
When you're facing a problem, like how to make an electric car more efficient, you could sit down and talk it through. But at Honda, we decided to listen to the wind tunnel. With wing mirrors? Or without? With? Without? With? Without? Or with cameras instead of wing mirrors? The new Honda E with wing cameras, not mirrors, because we listen to the wind. Honda, the power of dreams.
If you have to drive, then it's more important than ever to watch your speed. As London starts to reopen, there are going to be more people on our streets. There'll be more people cycling, more people walking to work or to the shops. If you must drive, avoid the morning and evening peaks when the roads will be busier. We want the streets to be safe for everyone, all the time. So watch your speed. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Who says only the experts get to do the talking? On the Scuttlepuck NHL Hockey Podcast, irreverent outsiders Mike Bond and Dale Horde give their untrained opinions on all things hockey from the fans' perspective.
I don't know how you get those guys out of there. And Crosby, as great as he's been, it's just such a different era, so it's tough with the... he didn't have the crazy number of points that Orr, Lemieux, and Gretzky did.
Search Scuttlepuck on TuneIn to listen.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller.
And here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. Matt, in the markets, it looks as if we're still in positive territory, up by 0.4% on the European market.
Yeah, we're looking at gains here, especially here, I should say, in Germany. Right now, the DAX is up 162 points to 12,657. Other indexes aren't gaining nearly as much. In fact, the FTSE is down 6 points right now to 61.49. The CAC 40 is up, but only about 0.25%, as is the IBEX 35 in Madrid, and the FTSE MIB is unchanged. So it's an interesting market. If you're prepping for the U.S. Open this morning, we're looking at futures that are mixed as well and have been pretty much in this state all morning. NASDAQ futures gaining slightly, about 0.2%. Dow and S&P mini futures down a little bit, but really just fractional losses there. So it's anybody's guess as to the direction of this market. It does look like it's the tech stocks, not just from that reading, that are going to do well, but also if you look at what's going on, the reason for the big gain in the DAX, that is SAP, Europe's largest tech company. I think it's the second biggest software maker in the world, certainly one of the top three. It is gaining 8% right now, so it's adding a ton of points to the DAX, and outperformance of tech stocks is likely what you're going to see in the U.S. this morning as well.
Okay, so that's the markets for you. Now, let's focus a bit on what Chancellor Rishi Sunak said yesterday, the package of measures to help the UK economy. So the government announced the £30 billion of measures, but the British Chambers of Commerce has called on Sunak to consider taking further bold steps. Joining us now is Hannah Essex, who is the co-executive director at the British Chambers of Commerce. Thank you for joining us, Hannah. Look, last week we had your Director General on, Adam Marshall, who's a regular with us, of course. He talked about the Chancellor needing to take bold steps. Doesn't look as if you think that is what he did.
All of the announcements the Chancellor made yesterday are very welcome, and there are specific things like the VAT cut that will help certain sectors of the economy. We also were really pleased to see a focus on apprenticeships and on jobs and traineeships for young people. So there's been some good announcements over the past week, and particularly yesterday. What we don't know is no one can predict the future. So what we're saying to the Chancellor is that he needs to keep open-minded about what else might need to happen in order to protect livelihoods in the weeks and months ahead. So we're starting to see an easing up of restrictions, but some businesses are still closed. And for those businesses, it's really a worrying time. They don't know when they're going to be able to be open, and they don't know whether or not their customers are going to come back when they do.
But if we get no second wave of the virus, if we have managed to control it, as it seems to be at least at the moment, then surely the government has actually done enough so far. I mean, certainly ramped up debt for the government, in a way that will last for years and will be difficult to bring down, and tax rises may have to come.
Now, those are two separate things, though, aren't they? I mean, Are you doing enough to help the economy is one question. Are you ramping up debt that may or may not hurt your government is another?
Yes, true. Hannah, your view?
Well, that's a challenge, and what we don't want is to tie the hands of future generations by building up a debt that's then difficult to manage. And what we don't want to see a return to some of the austerity measures that were in place beforehand. But we do know that job losses, massive job losses, and businesses failing is really bad for the economy, and it's really bad for people and communities. So what we're saying is that the Chancellor should keep open-minded. He may have done enough right now, but we still are in very early stages of the easing of restrictions. We still don't have some businesses open. We still don't know what the virus is going to do in the future. And the big challenge at the moment is consumer confidence. So people aren't going out and behaving in the ways they did pre-lockdown, even though bars and restaurants and so on are open. And so that pent-up demand that people expect to be released isn't really being released in a way that it needs to be to get the economy back on track.
So you sound a little cautious, and you're being very polite as far as Rishi Sunak's plan. What if you were to be more direct, Hannah? What do British businesses need this government to do now in order to ensure that the bridge that they have started building is actually finished and, you can get to the other side?
So we are asked the Chancellor to look at the overall cost of employment. So, for example, by reducing the employer contribution to national insurance, we want to look at things like the annual investment allowance, which will incentivise investment in growth and activities that will create jobs and will create growth within a business. And we want to see reassurances that if there is either a localised or a national lockdown in the future, there is a safety net there for businesses. So they know that they can rebuild and they can spend with confidence because the government will be there to back them if, through no fault of their own, they have to close down again for a period of time.
Well, what's your take on tax rises? I mean, that is being talked about even now, the possibility of a wealth tax. Is that in the pipeline, do you think? Will that be inevitable at some point, fairly soon, in a year or so?
I mean, the Chancellor's got to look at in the longer term, how do we get things back on an even keel where we start to reduce the debt that we've accrued over the course of this year. Taxes will be something that will have to be considered. We don't yet, as a chamber network, have a strong view on what the solution is, but it's certainly going to be a necessary consideration. But the best thing we can do for the economy is to keep people in jobs, is to get businesses growing, it's to get a security around the future trading arrangements that we have with Europe and the rest of the world, so that we can start to build our export business back up again, and to get the whole economy reopened in a way that is safe and that starts to put money back into the exchequer.
Yeah, Hannah, so many challenges. Look, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Been really good to have you on the programme. Hannah Essex, who's the co-executive director of the British Chambers of Commerce. And Matt, I think Therese Raphael's piece on the Bloomberg Terminal this morning on OPIN is really interesting. Talking about this is the best time really for the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who enjoys a 92% approval rating. She sort of says, look, it can't possibly last.
Yeah, that's Putin-esque, a 92% approval rating.
But without the tactics, I suspect.
I'm not even going to delve into that. Let's get to world national news instead. We go to Roger Hearing. Roger?
Thanks, Matt. Yes, Australia has suspended its extradition agreement with Hong Kong, and it's offering longer skilled migrants 5 years visas and a path to citizenship. Bloomberg's Jason Scott has the story.
Australia is suspending its extradition agreement with Hong Kong and will give skilled migrants from the city 5-year visas with a pathway to permanent residence. Prime Minister Scott Morrison's announcement comes after China imposed sweeping national security legislation on the financial hub. Canada last week suspended its extradition agreement with the former British colony. Though China remains Australia's largest trading partner, Morrison's moves are likely to fuel tensions between the two countries as their relations worsen. In Canberra, Jason Scott, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now, yesterday, the UK Chancellor Rishi Sunak announced £30 billion of tax cuts and extra spending to support the UK economy. He's raising the threshold for stamp duty, cutting taxes for the hospitality industry, and he's even offered vouchers to cut the cost of eating out in August. His aim is to boost consumer confidence and protect jobs. In the US, California and Texas reported a record number of new coronavirus cases as infections in the US passed 3 million. Despite surging numbers, the Vice President, Mike Pence, insists it is under control.
We're actually seeing early indications of a percent of positive testing flattening in Arizona and Florida and Texas. Governors in each of those states have taken strong steps to flatten the curve.
And the Mexican President, Andrés Manuel López Obrador's first visit to the White House seals an unlikely partnership with Donald Trump. Bloomberg's Jose Orozco reports.
President Donald Trump cited cooperation with Mexico on trade, immigration, and combating drug trafficking as he hosted Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. López Obrador said the U.S. has treated Mexico with dignity, despite President Trump's many claims that Mexico would pay for his border wall. The meeting between the two was set to celebrate the finalization of a pact updating the North American Free Trade Agreement. In Mexico City, Jose Orozco, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Hearing. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Roger, with that world news update. Now, coming up next on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we're going to talk more about the markets with Seema Shah, who'll be joining us from Principal Global Investors, their chief strategist. Really, the markets, Matt, kind of weighing the more positive economic data that we do seem to be getting with the concerns around the coronavirus and these 12 million coronavirus cases around the world, just huge numbers.
Yeah, the number of, and remember we were talking about before the story mentioning Tom Lee from Fundstrat. It's not the number of infections that really matters to Wall Street right now, or it doesn't at least look so. It looks like it's the death rate that really matters, and how fast that's climbing. I'm sure they're watching that very closely and taking any changes very seriously. But as for now, it doesn't seem to be the headline number that's worrying the markets. We continue to see a rally here in Germany.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Hi, I'm Bill Hageman, Withum's proud managing partner and CEO. We recognize this disruptive time is unsettling. For the past 45 years, Withum has been committed to helping our clients, our people, and our communities to be in a position of strength with innovative business advisory, tax, and assurance solutions. If you need guidance on business interruption and continuity issues or remote workplace solutions, please visit our website at withum.com. Together, we can get through these challenging times.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me...
Morning, everybody. I'm placing a new order for British pound. So the order will be 126.38. New order placed for 126.38. Okay, it's executed. It's sell short British pound against United States dollar.
Wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council. 25.
Find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Thursday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel, Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not get road ready with a free car check worth £15 at all our stores and garages? With 25,000 weekly slots available at 700 locations, you can count on us to get you safely back on the road. Or even back beside the seaside. From MOTs to tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
And action.
I was offered one.
Cut. That's not on the script.
I was offered one. Get you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was offered one.
Come boy. I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished. With over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Short on time? Don't worry. You can still get your cook on with Asda. Get 3 Asda ready meals for just £5.50. Like our beef lasagna or our tomato and mozzarella panette bake. Hang up your oven gloves, we've got dinner covered. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores and lines subject to availability. Meals 400 grams, £2.10 each.
How do we control coronavirus now? Here's Michael, a delivery driver.
All day, every day, I'm seeing people. Last thing I want to do is give anyone coronavirus. So the first sign of a cough, soon as my temperature rises, any loss of taste or smell, I'm staying in, booking a test, only going out to get it done. I mean, you want to know straight away, right? That's how we protect each other.
To get a test, go to nhs.uk/coronavirus or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg QuickTake. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Anne-Marie Horder with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Across equity markets this morning in Europe, we are mostly to the upside, especially the DAX. We're up more than 1%. Some softness, though, in London. FTSE 100 down 0.2%. Across the Stock 600, the benchmark index, we're up 0.3%, snapping those 2 days of losses. The SAP, that tech firm, the biggest one in Europe, is up more than 7% this morning after reporting better than expected revenue. In Asia, Chinese equities, another blockbuster day. CSI 300 and Shanghai Composite closing at 8 days of gains this morning. In U.S. equity futures, though, we are a little bit softer. We're waiting for that weekly U.S. jobless claims report. In oil this morning, we are trading just under $41 a barrel in WTI, down 0.2%. Flat on Brent, $43.29. Lots of concerns right now in the oil market, swelling U.S. stockpiles in Cushing, Oklahoma. And gold this morning, another shining day, up nearly 0.4%. $18.15 an ounce. Some market watchers believe we could be hitting new all-time highs on gold. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash, and here's Roger Hearing for more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. In Israel, critics say the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is undermining democracy. This week, Parliament approved an emergency law that curtailed its own powers. It allows the Cabinet to take any decisions deemed necessary to curb the spread of coronavirus. Netanyahu says these emergency measures are needed. Hong Kong has recorded at least 16 local coronavirus cases this morning, with around 10 of unknown origin. The financial hub is set to announce the tightening of social distancing measures to control the spread later today, according to local media. The government's also going to restrict the numbers of people at a restaurant table to 8. And Thailand, the world's top producer of coconut milk, says it will enable retailers and consumers to trace coconuts back to their source. This will show whether monkeys have been used for harvesting. The $400 million industry, which relies on monkeys at some plantations, is facing possible boycotts in the US, Europe and Australia. This comes after the animal rights group PETA alleged that monkeys are being abused and treated like coconut picking machines. Global News 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg.
Hi, Andres. Yes, you're absolutely right. Sell is letter S, buy is letter B. Pritesh was right. Okay? So I sold short British pound and I still hold positions on Japanese yen. All right?
farming of animals is
no, that's
really
not
bad.
cool at all.
Yeah,
That's not
cool.
I
Even
think
though I'm
of
a meat eater.
I think of, in Latin America, South America, you hear stories of monkeys that are operating pickpocket schemes, and I just think it's brilliant. With comic value, but I don't think it's okay, obviously, to factory farm monkeys or to use them unfairly.
But I guess, I must say, I so rarely would see or eat a coconut that it's not something that I've really thought about. But I guess with global supply chains, maybe it should be.
I don't like coconuts either. But I do love monkeys.
Well,
let's get over to Nathan Hager right now, preparing for... Nathan, do you ever have
I'm going to put
like a monkey around the house
on a
just making
tape
you a
and just
coffee?
keep that going in a loop? Matt Miller saying, "I love monkeys." That made my day.
I've always wanted to have a monkey, as a pet.
You always wanted to be Indiana
capuchins?
Jones, I suspect, with the monkey to boot.
The monkey dies, and that's horrible.
Yeah.
Our own Ross from Friends.
So what have you got planned for... there's a lot going on in tech.
Yeah, there's certainly. Tech has been riding high throughout this rally, this general rally that we've seen in U.S. stocks. But the focus, as always, at least for the last few months for investors this morning, is the coronavirus. Along with tech hitting highs, we're just coming off a day when the number of infections hit a new one-day high in this country. And now momentum is building around the idea of mandating mask wearing nationwide to try to keep this country from shutting down again nationwide. Of course, we have seen positive news on the economic front of late, and we're going to see whether that momentum continues when we get the latest weekly jobless claims later on this morning. We'll talk about it with Mark Chandler of Bannockburn Global and Lee Farage of State Street. They're both with us this morning. We're also going to check in with Bloomberg's Ben Stupples on one of the most read stories on the terminal this morning, why some of the world's richest investors are saying, why am I paying so much for wealth management? Join me and Karen Moscow for all that coming up here on Bloomberg Daybreak. Matt?
Yeah, that's a great story by Tom Metcalf today. World's rich question high fees with wealth hitting $74 trillion.
Yeah, so they can afford the fees, but, you wonder. Well, the way the market's going, why should we pay?
To that kind of thing. Exactly. Yeah. Meanwhile, I would never look at my statement, and that's why I'm not on that list. All right. Nathan Hager coming up with Karen Moscow next. If you're listening on Sirius XM, if you're listening on London DAB, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
Right, and a lady who I'm sure always looks at the statement joining us next. European markets generally trading higher this morning after a strong close in China. But Seema Shah, who's chief strategist at Principal Global Investors, sees a period now actually of consolidation ahead, although no return to the bear market. Seema Shah, good morning. Thanks for joining us. Look, how optimistic are you then about a rebound in Europe and in the US, the major markets?
Good morning. So I think we have certainly become a bit more optimistic about Europe, and I think there's a couple of reasons around that. First is, of course, the ECB just portraying a lot more credibility and inspiring more confidence in investors. Of course, the EU Recovery Fund, but also just the way that Europe has handled the virus and managed to keep that curve pretty flat just means that there is a period of catch-up. Now, I don't think this is something which is for long-term. Ultimately, the European growth story is certainly just not as impressive as the US. But given that the valuation, the relative valuations up to date, we think there is some space for Europe. When we look at the US, we do have some concerns. A lot of the work that's been done for markets has really been driven by central bank policy. The economic improvement is really down to a release of pent-up demand that accumulated during the lockdown. So we have got growing concerns that that's starting to taper off, and certainly the resurgence in viruses is not going to help the situation.
What do you think about the valuations that we see? I mean, the S&P 500 is up, I think, above 20 now, and the stock 600 here in Europe is below 16. Is there more opportunity here than there is there?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think there's an opportunity for the short term. Certainly, when we look at the European data, what's been really interesting is that you haven't seen maybe as quite a big a pop as you've seen in the US, and I think this is a real positive because the last thing that we really want to see is European data surging. because essentially that's just telling you that people are losing a little bit of the caution that they need, and that could, result in a resurgence in the virus. So almost slow and steady wins the race, and that really works in Europe's favour at this time.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. What about dividends then? I mentioned this idea that the UK is losing its appeal because the big dividend payers, the energy stocks, not looking so generous now. But how strongly do you think they'll hold up in Europe? And does that make a difference for your investment strategy?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I think for the UK, I think that's definitely true. I mean, in fact, there's several reasons actually why we not particularly favourable for the UK. When it comes to Europe, I think that's also a good story. We tend to think that as we look at the drivers over the last few years, such as buybacks and dividends, a lot of that has been taken out of the show. And those sectors that have really benefited, it just does put a lot more pressure on them going forward. And actually, that's another reason why we still like technology, because they really haven't benefited from the government help as much. And it means that they're less held back by a lot of these measures that have been taking place. And that will then continue to pressure on them.
What are the other industries where you see opportunity, Seema?
So we have dialed back a little bit of our equity positioning overall, but we've maintained a very defensive sectoral makeup, especially focused within the growth side rather than value. So our favourite stocks throughout all of this whole process have still been technology and really on the mega caps. We know, of course, that, nobody denies that it's very expensive. But in this kind of environment, what investors want is companies which have got really strong balance sheets, with positive cash flow, haven't built up too much leverage, and, of course, have a secular growth story, which, unfortunately, not many sectors do have at this stage. So, certainly, we are focused on technology. We look at cyclicals, but we do think that you need to be a little bit more discerning about where you're going within the cyclical space.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something to watch out for. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Seema Shah, who will, of course, continue the conversation on Bloomberg Surveillance. Seema Shah, Principal Global Investors Chief Strategist. Thank you so much for your time. Look, don't forget that, of course, next week is the big conflab with the EU leaders talking about the big recovery funds. But actually today at lunchtime, the German Chancellor is going to be holding a press conference with one of the people who's most against it, Mark Rutte, the Netherlands Prime Minister. So I'll be watching out for that at lunchtime.
Yeah, definitely will be interesting to see what Mark Rutte has to say and whether or not the Frugal Four really try and block this, or, if Angela Merkel, with her decades of experience and the incredible amount of power that she's amassed, can push it through as she seems determined to do, really moving into a new era, one of shared debt for European Union countries. This is what you're watching, is the coronavirus pushing the European Union closer and closer together. Maybe difficult news ahead of Brexit. This is Bloomberg.
A social distancing tip.
When your tenants have a blown fuse box and you've got a busy day ahead, superheroes crashing through the wall isn't going to help anyone. With Direct Line Landlord Emergency added to your policy, we're on it to send a rather super electrician in 4 hours before you've tucked into your lunch. We can also assemble plumbers, locksmiths, glaziers and drainage engineers. Search Direct Line Landlord Emergency. We're on it. Direct Line. Residential properties. Optional add-on up to $1,500 per call-out. Extreme weather conditions may extend response time. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Thursday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel, Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, July 9th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Daily coronavirus infections in the U.S. hit a fresh high.
Cases in California hit a record while Texas reports its highest deaths yet.
Calls for a national mask mandate gather steam from Chicago to Miami.
And the White House starts a push to reopen schools across the country.
Governor Cuomo says he will make a decision next month on reopening schools. Plus, the Supreme Court rules today about President Trump's taxes. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The Nets have added an NBA veteran, and the Ivy League is the first college conference to cancel all sports in the fall.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning. I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by SEI. Asset managers don't get results that are off the charts when their solutions are off the shelf. Learn how SEI's operating platform can turn infrastructure into a competitive advantage at SEIC.com/IMS.
And S&P futures are lower this morning. It is 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down 3 points. Dow futures down 41. NASDAQ futures are higher, up 21. The DAX in Germany is up 1.25%. CAC in Paris up 0.2%. And the FTSE 100 is lower, down 0.25%. 10-year Treasury up 4/30 seconds, yield 0.64%. The yield on the 2-year 0.15%. And NYMEX crude oil is down 0.3% at $40.78 a barrel. Nathan.
Karen, coronavirus infections in the U.S. have hit another daily record. California is reporting a new high in cases as Governor Gavin Newsom walks a fine line between alarm and reassurance. Here with more is Ed Baxter from our Bloomberg 960 newsroom in San Francisco.
Governor Newsom on one hand talks about the dramatic increase in the number of cases, but then says the state is well prepared and we will get through this.
We will. There's no question in my mind about that. The question is when. And that determines, basis on the determination of how we conduct ourselves, how we behave.
And this, as the state reports, the biggest daily jump since the pandemic began. As alarming, though, is the 14-day positivity rate climbing to 7.1% from 6.8%. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Ed, thank you. In Florida, Miami-Dade County reports its highest level of hospitalization since April. The mayor of Miami is calling for a national mandate on masks ahead of President Trump's visit to the state tomorrow. Bloomberg's Denise Pellegrini reports.
Mayor Francis Suarez calls wearing a mask a low-cost, high-yield way to deal with COVID-19.
It doesn't damage anyone's business, and it could significantly improve the circumstances. It's a no-brainer.
Suarez, who is a Republican, says we can't just keep shutting down and reopening the economy, and he wants a long-term strategy. Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Denise Suarez isn't alone in pushing for a national mandate on masks. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker says it might be the most important measure to save lives.
We need a national masking mandate. We instituted ours in Illinois on May 1st, one of the first in the nation, and it aligns with our most significant downward shifts in our infection rate.
In testimony to the House Homeland Security Committee, Governor Pritzker called for a stronger national response to the pandemic.
Meantime, in Texas, we're seeing a second straight day of record deaths from the virus. That has Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner canceling the state's Republican convention.
This convention is not moving forward, and it's because of the public health risk that it poses.
And Houston's mayor is also pushing back against proposals to reopen schools in August, saying it's premature for those discussions.
Still, the Trump administration is pushing for classes to reopen nationwide.
We hope every school in America is able to open this fall.
Vice President Mike Pence was joined by Education Secretary Betsy DeVos at a coronavirus task force briefing focused on restarting face-to-face education.
Ultimately, it's not a matter of if schools should reopen. It's simply a matter of how. They must fully open, and they must be fully operational.
The push sets up a potential fight between federal and local authorities, some of whom are planning only part-time in-person learning this fall.
Meantime, a top health official in Tulsa, Oklahoma, says President Trump's campaign rally in the city likely contributed to a spike in cases. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with the details. John, good morning.
And Karen, Tulsa County accounts for about a quarter of Oklahoma's nearly 18,000 infections. The daily cases just eclipsed the county's one-week average. And the Tulsa health director, Bruce Dart, says events in the past few weeks likely contributed to that. He's referring to the June 20th rally, with an estimated 6,200 people gathered indoors, often without masks. The crowd estimate from Tulsa's fire department would make it the largest indoor U.S. event since March. The president plans to hold another rally Saturday inside an airplane hangar in New Hampshire. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. There are more than 120 coronavirus vaccine candidates in the works, but the timeline for most of them remains cloudy. Merck is among the companies working on a shot. CEO Ken Frazier sat down for a conversation with David Rubenstein on Leadership Live, heard weekly on Bloomberg Television. He cautions against hopes for a vaccine in the coming months.
The fastest vaccine ever developed was our mumps vaccine, and that took 4 years. So now we know that the urgency of the situation is going to cause us to try to move quickly, but never, ever at the expense of safety.
With so many shots in the works, experts say we could end up with several vaccines. The most optimistic estimates call for the first to be ready in 6 months.
Coming up today, we get the latest reading on the economic fallout from the virus. Economists predict another 1.3 million Americans filed unemployment claims last week. Here with more is Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Jobless claims have been running above 1 million since mid-March, peaking at 6.9 million at the end of that month. Bloomberg Economics says new virus cases pose a threat to the fragile recovery in the labor market and is warning of new job cuts in services such as leisure and hospitality. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Vinny. Jobless claims in New Jersey are running above 1 million, with 30% of the state's workforce filing claims since March. Later today, we discuss the slump and New Jersey's response to the pandemic with Governor Phil Murphy. Tune in for that conversation at 5 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and television.
And S&P futures are lower, down 3 points. Dow futures down 39. NASDAQ futures up 22. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.25% or 11 cents at 40.
Okay, I'm placing stop on profit for British pound at 126.36. Stop on profit at 126.36. Okay.
Cuomo says the federal government has no authority on school reopenings. He made his comments in response to President Donald Trump calling for schools to reopen. Meanwhile, New York Mayor Bill de Blasio said the city's 1.1 million students will have a blended learning schedule in order to maintain fewer students in a school building at any given time.
Here's the deal. For the vast majority of kids in the vast majority of schools, you'll be going to school, to the classroom, either 2 days a week or 3 days a week, depending on the week.
De Blasio says the other days students will be taught remotely. Connecticut's governor says they plan on reopening schools on time. Governor Ned Lamont spoke with Bloomberg's David Weston.
Because we have an infection rate less than 1%, because we're meeting all the metrics, we are planning to open our schools on time in late August, September, a normal school day, so there's not a lot of back and forth, some days on, some days off. I think that's better for the kids and certainly for the employers and getting our economy going again. They like to know what the work schedule is of the people who are working for them.
New Jersey's Motor Vehicles Agency was overwhelmed for the second straight day after reopening Tuesday. It will extend its hours, but Governor Phil Murphy warned that long lines will continue for a bit. The agency's offices, closed since March 15th, were swamped by customers seeking driving tests, automobile registrations, license renewals, and other documents. The Supreme Court is expected to rule on whether Congress and the Manhattan District Attorney can see President Donald Trump's taxes and other financial records that the president has fought hard to keep private. The case, which could be resolved today, tests the balance of power between the White House and Congress, as well as Trump.
That's it. Position closed on British pound, and we have a profit 200 pounds.
24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thank you. It's 5:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Burden Accountants and Advisors Sports Report. Good morning, John Stashauer.
Good morning, Nathan. The Ivy League has led the way once again. It was the ancient eighth. It was the first to cancel games. The Ivy scrapped its postseason basketball tournaments on March 10th, the day before the NBA stopped play, and soon after everyone did. Now the Ivy, the first to cancel fall sports, including football. Players will be allowed to practice. No word on whether games will instead be played in the spring. Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal says the major college sports leagues should follow suit. Last night in Orlando, the return of Major League Soccer, and before the game, over 100 African-American players took a knee and raised their fists. NYCFC plays tonight against Philadelphia. The depleted Nets are headed to Orlando for the NBA restart. 4 Nets aren't playing, so Brooklyn has signed 40-year-old Jamal Crawford, who's played for 8 teams in his 19-year career. An update on Mets summer camp from new manager Luis Rojas.
Once we go through screening, we go through the distancing and fulfill protocols that we've been doing here. I think we get on the field and we have fun, and so that challenge over seeing it. And
as you can see, it's not a rocket science, and I believe anybody could do this. All you need to do, the strategy, basically, you can find it on our description, and you can trade and make some profit as well. Okay.
Company is cutting Washington Redskins merchandise from its site, and it's a big one. Amazon now joins Walmart, Target, and Nike in casting out a team name that contains a racial slur. According to a letter reviewed by Bloomberg, the e-commerce giant told sellers they had 48 hours to review and remove Redskins products flagged by Amazon. For years, activists have lobbied the NFL's Redskins to change their name. Owner Daniel Snyder said last week that the organization is now reviewing its name. S&P futures lower by 2 points. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine being denied an apartment.
Also, one quite important thing I want to point out, that I never put stop loss, as eventually, if people will put stop loss, they will lose all their money. Because I've been trading for over 20 years. I developed a strategy that allows me to put stop on profit. You might wait longer, like for example, in our example on Japanese yen, I'm waiting for a few weeks or maybe 1 week until it will reach a certain level, and I will sell with profit, but I never sell with loss for years. So this is how it works. So if you want to trade and trade profitably, you better get the strategy.
Public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Thursday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
Listen, that's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
Here's Taylor Riggs.
The CEOs of Amazon, Facebook, Alphabet, and Apple will all be going over to Washington via Zoom, I suppose. On July 27th, they're going to be in front of the U.S. congressional panel investigating competition into the technology industry. The 4 big tech executives are likely to face a torrent of critical questions from lawmakers on the panel's antitrust subcommittee as the investigation builds a case for revamping antitrust enforcement. To discuss, we are joined by Congressman Ken Buck of Colorado. Congressman, thank you for joining us here. Curious about what you really want to hear from these executives come July 27.
Well, we've been investigating now in the subcommittee for several months, and what I personally want to hear about are how these large tech companies are using their platforms and if they are discriminating against the customers of those large platforms and competing unfairly with those customers. I think there are a number of buckets of issues that are being investigated right now. Some of the companies have purchased what would be competitors in the marketplace and have stifled competition to their platforms.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. European stocks are snapping a 2-day losing streak as investors kept faith with economic support policies, helped by some reassuring earnings news. The dollar is fluctuating along with U.S. stock index futures. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down about 6 points. Dow futures down 62. NASDAQ futures up 16. The DAX in Germany is up 1.2%. 10-year Treasury up 3/32, yield 0.65%. The yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.3% or 12 cents at $40.78 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.1% or $2.60 at $18.2320 an ounce. The euro 1.1324 against the dollar, British pound 1.2640, and the yen 107.32. And today we are watching for the weekly report on initial jobless claims at 8:30 Wall Street time. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. The nation has reached a grim milestone. The number of COVID-19 infections in the country has reached over 3 million cases. More than 60,000 positive diagnoses were confirmed yesterday alone. The Supreme Court is expected to rule on whether Congress and the Manhattan District Attorney can see President Trump's taxes and other financial records that the president has fought hard to keep private. The case, which could be resolved today, tests Trump's claim that he can't be investigated while he holds office. Presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden will call for a moderate approach toward reviving the U.S. economy. If elected president, Biden will deliver his economic speech today in Pennsylvania. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. It's 5:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak, and Mark Chandler is with us right now, Chief Market Strategist at Bannockburn Global. Mark, good morning. You got to wonder whether some of the fluctuations that we're seeing in the futures markets and with the dollar are coming ahead of the release of the latest weekly jobless claims. We've had some pretty positive economic news of late. What do you think we're going to get later this morning?
Well, I think, Nathan, good morning. I kind of been thinking that there's been when we look at a lot of the strong economic data, we are seeing some suggesting that the economy's got some nice momentum going into Q3. However, the jobs data has actually been lagging behind expectations. It's remarkable that here we are, and this is going to be covering the week of July 4th, which is the holiday shortened week in the U.S., and we're still looking at well over 1 million people filing unemployment benefits for the first time. And I think this becomes particularly important because later this month we've got a couple of fiscal cliffs. One is that $600 a week payment, extra unemployment insurance that expires at the end of the month. And about a week or so before that, we have the end of the freeze on foreclosures and evictions. And with this kind of rise in unemployment claims, it makes it difficult to really justify pulling away the punch bowl, I think.
So do you think that we're going to need more fiscal support then to keep the momentum going in the market?
Well, I don't know any momentum. I think we need more stimulus to support the economy. The market seems to be doing fine on its own. You know, the NASDAQ just closed at record highs. And I kind of think that's part of the challenge here, is that a lot of the liquidity that the central banks are providing is lifting asset prices, not necessarily stimulating the economy directly.
So what effect could dial-backs that we're starting to see in many cities and states have on the momentum for the recovery that we're in of late?
You're right. You know, we're seeing several Fed officials commenting on that as well, suggesting that maybe the recovery is going to be uneven and less dramatic, at least in Q3, than many people hoped for. So I think that we're going to be watching those states closely. You look at several of those states, California, Texas, Florida, and you've got a good chunk of the economy there, about a third of the economy. So we're going to be watching that closely. But so far, a lot of that hit is in Q2. And we knew that Q2 is going to be horrible. By horrible, I mean a loss, a contraction at an annualized pace of something between, say, 30 and 40% or so.
Can the dollar continue to look past the rising COVID numbers? We've had some pretty strong momentum when it comes to the dollar weakening as haven demand starts to slip away. What's your outlook for the dollar going forward?
Yeah, Nathan, I'm in that camp that looks for a weaker dollar. What strikes me is that the dollar could rally on a couple of interesting fundamental developments. These include the Fed's balance sheet has shrunk for the last 3 weeks, and we'll get an update later today. Secondly, our Fed funds rate has crept up. It's only a couple of basis points, but it's taking place in a context in which the ECB's balance sheet just jumped by almost 10% as it made over €1 trillion loans to European banks at minus 100 basis point yield. And their equivalent of Fed funds, the effective Fed funds, like weighted by volume, fell to new record lows earlier this week, and yet the euro continues to rally. So I think this reflects a change in sentiment towards the dollar.
You mentioned some of the commentary from the Fed. We've also heard from Loretta Mester at the Cleveland Fed saying that the rising case count poses downside risks to the economy. What could that mean for the Fed's policy path going forward, do you think?
Yeah, that's a tough one because you think that the Fed's got its foot all the way on the accelerator now. But I think that many people have begun, including the Fed, of course, talking about looking at what other countries are doing. And one thing that looks like sort of a page in the playbook could be what people call yield curve control, which basically targets something. Right now, the Fed targets the Fed funds rate. But they could target something further out on the curve, say it's 3-year or 5-year. Australia targets the 3-year at the same rate that they target the overnight money, 25 basis points. The Bank of Japan targets a 10-year yield around 0. And so the Federal Reserve, I think the latest minutes showed a bit of reluctance to do so. But with supply, Treasury supply still coming in, I think they'll try to act to hold off a premature rise in U.S. yields. And that would be one thing that they could do.
All right, Mark Chandler, good having you on with us this morning. Thanks so much. Mark Chandler is Chief Market Strategist at Bannockburn Global. S&P futures right now are down 7 points. Dow futures lower by 83. NASDAQ futures higher by 15 points as we look forward to the weekly jobless claims coming out at 8:30 Wall Street time. Euro 1.1322 against the dollar. The yen is at 107.32. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Today we'll get the latest unemployment claims numbers. In the meantime, stock futures are narrowly mixed. After a higher close yesterday, the broader market up almost 1%, and again, technology powered the gains. The Dow jumped 177 to 26,067. The S&P jumped 25 to 3170. The Nasdaq was up 149 points to 10,493, and that was another new record. Bed Bath & Beyond plans to close 200 stores over the next 2 years in a bid to cut costs. The retailer would not say how many jobs will be lost. In the latest quarter, net sales fell 49% overall, but rose 82% in the digital business. A new survey underscores how the pandemic has hit household finances. Bankrate says that among U.S. adults, almost half has seen a negative impact on their income because of the coronavirus. Almost 60% of those that saw a drop in income said they expect it will take longer than 3 months to recover. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. The university helped biomedical engineering professor Tara Alvarez launch a startup that may revolutionize vision therapy.
Our startup through NJIT is called Ocular Motor Technology. We create virtual reality vision therapy in a head-mounted display. So it's gaming, and basically we're sugarcoating the therapy so that children and young adolescents don't even realize they're doing therapy. To accomplish this, we need biomedical engineers, which are here on NJIT campus, computer scientists, artists, people that are into story development, and then we're collaborating with a lot of the large pediatric medical centers. This idea of a startup culture is extremely important to not just NJIT and the National Science Foundation, but also to the U.S. as a societal whole.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social...
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Thursday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
How do we control coronavirus now? This is Scott. He's a nurse.
NHS Test and Trace helps stop the spread of the virus in our communities. If you've got symptoms, even mild ones, get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we can trace the people you've been in contact with and contain the virus. So get tested and protect each other.
To get a test, go to nhs.uk/coronavirus or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
This is the home that stays in together. Zoflora's things clean in this windy weather.
That disinfects doorknobs, floors, baked bean cans.
Fills rooms with fragrance. Does meetings in gin jams.
This is a home that cares with pride.
Shares smiles and waves with those either side.
Because this is your London, not inside alone.
But all house proud together. One big beautiful home.
Zoflora, killing germs beautifully since 1922.
Nissan Sunderland factory is building cars again, and we're ready to get Britain moving. That's why this summer selected Nissan models come with a 3-month payment holiday, plus free roadside assistance, all at only 0% APR representative. We've built the cars, we've built the offers. Now it's time to get you back in the driving seat. See how we can help you at nissan.co.uk/payment holiday. And together, let's move beyond. PCP Nissan Finance. Order and register by 30th September 2020. Participating dealers only. Nissan. Innovation that excites. Make sure you don't miss out by visiting Westway Nissan.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and we're just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures, well, S&P futures are lower to start the day after coronavirus infections in the U.S. hit another daily record. California is reporting a new high in cases as Governor Gavin Newsom urges residents to wear face coverings.
We're seeing hospitalization rates grow. It's because people are not wearing their masks. People are not, for many different reasons and many different circumstances, practicing the physical distancing.
The governor of Illinois is also pushing for more masks. J.B. Pritzker says a national mandate could be the most important measure to save lives.
We instituted ours in Illinois on May 1st, one of the first in the nation, and it aligns with our most significant downward shifts in our infection rate.
Meantime, in Texas, we're seeing a second straight day of record deaths from the virus. That is Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner pushing back against plans to reopen schools.
Do everything we can to get this virus under control today. And then we can see where we will be in August or September.
Still, the Trump administration is pushing for classes to restart nationwide. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos addressed the issue at a coronavirus task force briefing.
Ultimately, it's not a matter of if schools should reopen. It's simply a matter of how. They must fully open, and they must be fully operational.
The push sets up a fight between federal and local authorities, some of whom are planning only part-time in-person classes this fall.
Meantime, a top health official in Tulsa, Oklahoma, says President Trump's campaign rally in the city likely contributed to a spike in cases. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with the details. John, good morning.
And Karen, the Tulsa Health Department says data and timing suggest a relationship between the increase in Tulsa County infections and the rally on June 20th. The president held that event despite pleas from local authorities to delay it. The county reported a jump in cases this week that eclipsed its one-week average. The president plans another rally this weekend in New Hampshire. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. Coming up today, we get the latest reading on the economic fallout from the virus. Economists predict another 1.3 million Americans filed unemployment claims last week. Look out for that data at 8:30 a.m. Wall Street time.
And again, S&P futures are lower. They're down 7 points now. Dow futures down 87. And NASDAQ futures remain higher, up 16. The 10-year Treasury up 4/30 seconds, yield 0.65%. And the yield on the 2-year 0.15%. The British pound is at 1.2639 against the dollar. The euro 1.1324. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thanks. 5:33 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr has more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Thank you very much, Nathan. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says the decision on whether schools will reopen for in-person learning in September will be made by the state during the first week of August. Cuomo says the federal government has no authority on school reopenings. He made his comments in response to President Trump calling for schools to reopen and threatened to withhold funding if they don't. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio says he anticipates a blended learning program for the city's 1.1 million students when the nation's largest public school system reopens.
Blended learning simply means at some points in the week, you're learning in person in the classroom. At other points in the week, you're learning remotely. And we all know remote learning is not perfect, but we've also seen a lot of kids benefit greatly from it during these last months. And we know we'll be able to do it even better in the months ahead.
De Blasio said masks and other PPE will be mandatory. Connecticut plans to reopen schools on time. Governor Ned Lamont, speaking to Bloomberg's David Weston, says while the state wants to reopen for business out of an abundance of caution, they aren't opening bars yet.
We've got about 95% of our economy open right now. But when it came to bars and nightclubs and big entertainment venues, I listen to governors from Florida and Texas and the such saying they regret that they did open their bars when they did. And that was an opportunity for some super spreading to go on. We don't want that to happen. So, in abundance of caution, we're not going to open them yet.
A Black Lives Matter mural will be painted today right in front of Trump Tower in Manhattan. President Trump tweeted earlier the mural would denigrate the luxury of Fifth Avenue. The Supreme Court is set to rule this morning on two big cases concerning President Trump's tax returns. Bloomberg's June Grasso has more.
The Supreme Court will issue the last opinions of the term today. Those include two of the most controversial cases of the term over subpoenas for President Trump's financial records from Congress and a New York prosecutor. Trump argues that lawmakers are trying to engage in law enforcement beyond Congress's constitutional powers and contends presidents should have absolute immunity from state criminal investigations while in office. Both cases could have profound long-term ramifications, potentially giving presidents sweeping new protections from investigations while in office. June Grasso, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Bard. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks for coming up to 5:36 on Wall Street. It's time for the Burden Accountants and Advisors Sports Report. Here's John Stashour.
All right, Nathan, the Ivy League, citing university restrictions on travel and visitors, has canceled all fall sports. They say it's about policies, not finances. Of course, the Ivy doesn't have as much at stake financially as major conferences. We've got those huge TV contracts that are used to support all the other sports on campus. But it was the Ivy League that led the way back in March. It was the first conference to cancel its postseason basketball tournaments. At Stanford, the athletic department looking at a $25 million deficit for the fiscal year, so the school has eliminated 11 of its 36 teams, effective at the end of this upcoming academic year. The Baltimore Ravens figured out that if they do allow fans in, but with social distancing restrictions, they'd have about 14,000 in a 71,000-seat stadium. The Mets, J.D. Davis, on what to expect without fans.
We got to find a way a little bit. It's going to be different. It's going to be, obviously everybody's going to feel a little bit isolated, especially, having our own teammates being in the stands, 6 to 10 feet apart. But you know what? We love playing this game. We enjoy being around each other. So I don't think it's going to be that much of a concern.
And no fans at Citi Field, but they will have cardboard cutouts with pictures of Mets season ticket holders. And the Jersey Devils season is over. When they return next season, their coach will be Lindy Ruff, who's been an NHL head coach for 20 years. He's currently an assistant with the Rangers. 40-year-old Jamal Crawford was unemployed, but with so many Brooklyn Nets not part of the NBA restart, the Nets have signed Crawford. This will be his 9th team. John Stashour, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
All right, John, thank you. It is 5:37 on Wall Street. Time for the Tri-State Business Report. Here's Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
A quarter of New York City's apartment renters haven't paid since March, according to the Community Housing Improvement Program. Some landlords with their own bills to pay are running out of savings, and the city is bracing for hundreds of millions of dollars in delinquent property taxes. Manhattan's rental market is starting to show the damage from a pandemic-fueled exodus. The borough's apartment vacancy rate in June hit the highest level on record. Available listings surged 85% from a year earlier to 10,789, according to appraiser Miller Samuel and brokerage Douglas Elliman Real Estate. Meanwhile, New Yorkers looking to move to Westchester are short on options. The number of single-family homes listed for sale in the county plunged the most on record in the second quarter. According to data going back to 1995, sales in Westchester dropped 21%, the biggest quarterly fall since 2009. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey.
Thanks, Ed. It's 5:38 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Jeff Mellinger, and on WTVN in Columbus, I'm reporting J.P. Morgan is suspending its plan to start reopening offices in Columbus.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and for WBBM in Chicago, we're watching for earnings from Walgreens.
I'm Caroline Hepcon, Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on warnings that the Chancellor's plan to revive the UK economy may not be enough to avoid mass unemployment.
I'm Steve Podeskin on 1010 Wins in New York. We're talking about New Jersey-based Bed Bath & Beyond, planning to close 200 of its stores.
I'm Ed Corey on WWJ in Detroit. I'm reporting GM has suffered a blow in a bid to punish Fiat Chrysler over alleged union bribes.
And those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. Now, some other stories we're following. Warren Buffett is dropping down the ranks of the world's richest. His $69 billion fortune puts him in 8th place on the Bloomberg billionaires list. That's the lowest Buffett's been since the index started in 2012. You can blame his generosity in part. Buffett gave away almost $3 billion of Berkshire Hathaway stock this week. U.S. companies slashed dividends in the second quarter at the fastest pace since 2009. That's according to S&P Dow Jones indices. Shareholders saw a net reduction of almost $43 billion in payouts on common stock. The pace of the cuts now appears to have slowed down. It's 5:40 on Wall Street, and the latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is online now. It's the heist issue, including the empty frames that remain the art world's biggest mystery. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MAG Go and listen to Business Week with Carol Vassar and Jason Kelly right here on Bloomberg Radio, or you can watch it on YouTube weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. Wall Street time. Get global business, finance, and tech news on your TV, computer, or mobile device. Just visit youtube.com and search Bloomberg Global News. S&P futures lower by 5 points right now. Dow futures down 73. NASDAQ futures still higher by almost 21 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon N.A. Member FDIC.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate.
When your tenants have a burst pipe and you've got a busy day ahead, superheroes crashing through the wall isn't going to help anyone. With Direct Line Landlord Emergency added to your policy, we're on it to send a rather super plumber in 4 hours before you've tucked into your lunch. We can also assemble locksmiths, glaziers, electricians and drainage engineers. Search Direct Line Landlord Emergency. We're on it. Direct Line. Residential properties. Optional add-on up to $1,500 per caller. Extreme weather conditions may extend response time. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Thursday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel, Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We can replace your battery at over 700 stores and garages, or even at your home or work with our mobile experts, so you can enjoy an engine that starts first time, every time, and start enjoying the open road again.
Are we nearly there yet?
From battery replacements to tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
You always say the best thing you ever did was join up. I bet you don't get the same experiences in Civvy Street. Remember those amazing deployments we had? And that feeling of pride. We'd love to have you back. Go on. Feel the pride again. Search RAF Rejoin Us.
TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Coronavirus may cause havoc with the 2020-2021 school year. The Trump White House wants doors to open on time. Others fear doing so is risky.
The Trump administration wants classrooms across the country to open on schedule, but
trying to open schools without accounting for and protecting students and staff from COVID is going to backfire.
Dr. Tom Frieden is the former director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Here's the bottom line. The single most important thing we can do to keep our schools safe has nothing to do with what happens in schools. It's how well we control COVID in the community.
I'm John Lawrence.
Asian stock markets have followed Wall Street higher following gains for U.S. technology stocks. Shanghai, Tokyo, and Hong Kong advanced. Wall Street turned in its sixth gain in 7 days as Apple, Amazon, and Microsoft rose. U.S. stocks have recovered most of this year's losses. I'm John Trout.
It's a new disease making an unprecedented impact.
The job losses were widespread.
It is a stunningly historic moment.
Your best strategy?
Is this a market that's accepted reality?
Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and S&P futures are trimming their losses right now, down about 1.5 points. Dow futures down 39, and NASDAQ futures higher, up 48. The DAX in Germany is up 1.25%. 10-year Treasury up 3/32, yield 0.65%. Yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.3% or 12 cents at $40.78 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.1% or $2.40 at $18.23 an ounce. The euro 1.1330 against the dollar. The yen is at 107.32. And today we are watching for the weekly report on initial jobless claims out at 8:30 Wall Street time. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, a grim milestone for the nation as the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases crossed 3 million. Now some states are warning their hospitals are under an unprecedented strain and could hit capacity. The Supreme Court is set to rule this morning on 2 big cases concerning President Trump. Trump has been trying to keep his tax returns and other financial information from being released to prosecutors in New York, as well as congressional investigators. The Pentagon's top leaders are going before Congress for the first time in months. They are likely to be questioned today on several major controversies, including President Trump's handling of protests near the White House last month. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thank you. It is 5:48 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. Some of the world's richest investors are starting to question the fees they're paying to wealth managers. This is one of the most read stories on the Bloomberg terminal this morning, and Bloomberg's Ben Stupples joins us from London now to tell us more about it. Good to have you with us on the program, Ben. From what I understand, this is based on a survey of wealth management clients. Tell us a little bit more about it. Who is being surveyed here?
Yeah, hi there, Nathan. Yeah, this is a survey of more than 2,500 individuals, and these individuals have 1 million of investable assets. So that's, their wealth excluding things like collectibles, their primary home. So these are individuals that we would call high net worth individuals in the wealth space. They're not ultra high net worth, so with about 30 million or more, and they're certainly not billionaires, but it's definitely a pretty comprehensive look into what we would say the lowest rung of the rich and what they're thinking right now.
Okay, so what are they thinking then about the fees they're paying to wealth managers? What's their biggest complaint?
Yeah, well, they're not happy, Nathan. Yeah, very not happy indeed, and I would say that it's a few bugbears around fees. One of the main ones being transparency. In fact, that's the top one. But also the way that fees are charged. So instead of being based, for example, on performance, a lot of the rich are pretty unhappy about the fact that it's just based on the amount, or just based on the assets under management. And one thing we should stress is that, the survey was carried out before the pandemic, just before, in fact, around January and February. But actually, what I think that is going to happen is the pandemic is actually, if anything, increase the scrutiny over these matters. The rich, the lowest high net worth individuals, certainly want, it seems, sort of a real return on what they're getting from their wealth managers. These are individuals that don't have their own family offices, sort of their own personal investment firms. So they are relying very much on their wealth management firms to provide them with the bulk of what's going on with their assets, and therefore fees are very important for them.
So does this point to some ways that wealth managers can justify their fees, sort of different ways that they can go about convincing their clients that, there's good reason to keep holding on to our advice?
Yeah, there's a few examples pointed out in the report. One that I just saw before we came on air is one top, maybe we won't name it, top British bank that has a really personalised service for these sort of clients, and it's effectively an online concierge where if you want to go out for a restaurant, for example, the bank helps you out, and if you want to go see a pop concert, for example, they'll get you exclusive tickets. And that is highlighted in the report as one way that wealth managers can help to provide an edge over competitors, but also help to be a real holistic service for their clients, and sort of helping to reflect what happens at the top end of the tree with the billionaires, because they have a whole staff of team who would do that for them. But at the lower levels down of the wealthy, the wealth managers can provide that service and although they may be providing it to every one of their clients who are in this space, it nonetheless can feel quite personalized.
It's interesting to see this evidence that, some of the well-heeled are questioning these fees when, global wealth is continuing to climb to all-time highs. So it almost makes an argument that some of these wealth managers could justify their fees already. I mean, it's not like people are losing money, at least on a general scale.
I think that's a fair point to make. But I would certainly say about the pandemic is that the choppy markets, the volatility we've seen, is definitely going to draw attention to performance. And I think something we've written about on the wealth team is how the wealthy have been using their time at home really to sort out do their homework on their wealth, and that includes things like fees. So the banks may be able to turn around, and wealth managers may be able to turn around and say, hey, actually, you're getting a good return. These fees are fair in our view. But I think nonetheless, the wealthy are certainly looking more at this area of their wealth during the pandemic due to the volatility, and frankly, due to, like many of us, having more time on our hands during these last few months.
Well, it's a fascinating look into what some of the world's most well-heeled are thinking at this time. Bloomberg's Ben Stupples, thanks again for being with us this morning. Karen?
All right, Nathan, thank you. It is 5:53 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
The IRS updated its reporting rules for businesses that paid sick leave and family leave benefits to workers affected by the coronavirus. The online prescription marketplace GoodRx will more clearly inform customers about its third-party data collection policies and provide an opt-out link. A business group had found that GoodRx did not meet industry standards for digital advertising. The Supreme Court cleared the way for Texas to carry out its first execution since the start of the pandemic.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need on one legal research platform. Guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
Now, in another legal development, the Supreme Court expanded religious rights in 2 cases yesterday. Justices upheld rules giving employers broad rights to refuse to offer birth control through health plans and giving religious organizations a bigger exemption from discrimination suits. For more on the 7-2 decision covering the Obamacare contraceptive mandate, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks to Richard Garnett, a professor at Notre Dame Law School.
The Trump administration expanded the ability to opt out of paying for contraceptive coverage from houses of worship to include publicly traded companies and universities with religious or moral objections to contraception. Tell us about that decision.
The court's ruling was focused primarily on whether or not the administration followed the correct procedures when it created this accommodation. So it's mainly an administrative law opinion. The court's opinion is not really about whether or not this exemption is a good idea. Now, as you said, the Trump administration expanded the religious exemption that the Supreme Court had affirmed in Hobby Lobby, for example, several years ago, to include entities that had, quote, moral, not just religious, but moral objections to providing contraception coverage in their insurance policies. Reasonable people can disagree about whether that expansion is good policy. The question is just whether the administration kind of followed the correct procedure for creating this exemption. And Justice Thomas for the court said, yes, they did, that there wasn't any kind of unlawful departure from the procedures that are required in order for an agency to change its rules, and that the accommodation was therefore permissible.
Justices Elena Kagan and Stephen Breyer joined the majority, but Kagan wrote a concurring opinion, and she said the lower courts could still consider arguments